Hello and welcome back to Jump To It for irishracing.com. Plenty of action to preview this weekend, especially when the flat season is upon us. Bit of a mix. We've got a bit of jumps racing and flat racing to cover. Of course, the highlight on the flats card, is the Doncaster Lincoln and also the Irish Lincoln as well. Now, to help me discuss all of the goings on this weekend are three wise men. We've got Vincent Finegan from irishracing.com, Ed Quigley and Stephen Harris. Now, Vincent, I'll start with you. What is your highlight of the flat season over from Ireland?
Well, this weekend we start off, of course, it's a bit mixed because we've just finished Cheltenham. We've still got Fairyhouse, Aintree and Punchestown to come, but the flat slots in this weekend with the start of it. So we've got the Lincoln is the big one, big handicap in both Doncaster and the Irish version in the Curragh on Saturday. So it'll be interesting. It's a bit of a diversion from the jumps for a little while, but it'll take a while for people to get used to the flat as well, because we're not quite sure what's happening. There's a lot of maiden races over the weekend. A lot of horses haven't run since last October. So not a punting card really at the Curragh this weekend, or Naas on Sunday for that matter.
And Stephen, just to bring you in as well, putting your bookmaker hat on, like Vincent alludes to it a little bit there, where there's not a great deal of information, not a whole lot of form with regards to the flat races. But how do you then go about pricing these up?
Well, I think personally, Vincent's right. It's a watching brief, really. You're not going to be getting too heavily involved. If you are going to have a bet, I would watch the last sort of couple of minutes on the exchanges, really, to see which horses are solid and attracting cash, and probably more pertinently, which ones aren't. Money tends to talk, particularly on the flat, much more than the jumps, in my opinion. And certainly these opening few weeks, it's well worth watching. The one thing to say about Doncaster, Joe, is the ground for the jumps has been appalling for the last 6 months or so. It's currently good to soft, or on the easier side of good, but the weather forecast looks set fair. So really, if it's in any kind of decent condition, it should be good ground to start off on Saturday, which is a plus. That's what you want for good quality flat racing.
Good stuff. And Ed, I'll bring you in here as well. You're going to be going a bit more in depth on the Sunday Ascot card over the jump. So which race in particular are you the most looking forward to?
Yeah, indeed. Well, a little bit of a lull, as Vincent said, in between for jumps racing fans, in between Cheltenham Festival ending and obviously moving on to Aintree, Punchestown and the like. Yeah, a pretty good card on the Sunday. We'll come on to later, but there's a what's often joked as the kind of Fred Winter consolation race. There's a juvenile handicap hurdle there, which has got a lot of the horses who were balloted out or didn't make the cut for the Boodles at the Cheltenham Festival, and there's some pretty tasty entries in there, some unexposed sorts. So yeah, it's always a great card if you're in the London area. You can get to that Ascot on the Sunday. Looking at the weather as well, it's going to be 20 degrees. It never gets too chaotic there. Sun will be out, and you do see some good quality jumps racing as well. So yeah, that Ascot card on Sunday, always good fun.
All right, great stuff. Well, plenty to dive into this weekend, but let's get into it with our feature races. And first of all, we're going to start off at Doncaster. All right, so the first race we're going to be looking at is Brocklesby, the first race on the card, the 115. Stephen, I want you to go through this with us. Again, not much information really to point towards the form of the horses running, but perhaps the trainers' form actually gives us something to look to when we're going to place a bet on this race.
Yeah, it's an impossible race to have any opinion on as a punter, Joe, but it's a good race to watch. A lot of people like to follow the 2-year-old exclusively, and actually it's a very good way of managing the flat season if you just concentrate on the juveniles. There's only a handful of races each day to watch rather than the sort of 50-odd that you get by the time we get into midsummer. So it's always a good idea. Eve Johnson-Houghton's had success in this race last year with Chindi, who actually runs later on the card as a juvenile. And she runs Blatant, who's had a jockey booked up since earlier in the week, which is usually a good sign. I'll be watching that one carefully, but tiny stakes if you're going to have a bet, and just watch the market, see which ones shorten up late.
Now, the one I actually had an eye on here was Confederation. So for John Butler, so he's in good form of late. In the last 21 days, 6 wins of 26, I believe it is, runs. But Ed, you've got a bit of a view on this one, or have you actually got a view at this stage?
Absolutely no view at all, to be honest with you. Yeah, unraced 2-year-olds. Yeah, good luck. If you, yeah, Stephen says, yeah, Chipotle, I think, won the race last year for the same yard as Blatant. Yeah, has to be respected. I often look for Richard Fahy in this race. He has an excellent record on this. I think he's won it 4 times last decade. Doesn't have a runner. So that is just kind of as far as that strike rate went. The only other one of note, I thought Bill Turner traditionally from his base down in Yeovil. He does very well with his 2-year-olds. He won this race a decade ago. He's got this Know What I Mean Harry in here. William Carson might be riding as well. So, look, all in all, could waffle on for ages. As Stephen says, market moves will probably tell you a lot more than what I could probably tell you on this show close to the off.
And you kind of alluded to maybe a horse not, or a trainer not running. Let's move on to the next feature. We're going to look at the 3 o'clock at Doncaster, the mile. Now, there's only 4 runners in here. It was 9 entered originally. So, Stephen, I'll bring you in down to 4 runners. I mean, is there much interest, or is it disappointing to see so few going for the race?
Yeah, I think they'll be mortified. There's 40 grand's worth of prize money and 4 runners. I've no idea what that's about. You'd have thought they'd be getting double figures at least. Roger Varian runs an interesting one here. Royal Champion, who I know is held in high regard. He's obviously been extremely hard to train. He's only made it to the racecourse a few times in his career, and he's been off for over 10 months since finishing tailed in the Dante at York. But he wasn't a huge price for the Dante. He's obviously, they know what they've got with Varians. They've got loads of good horses to measure them against. And I think it's significantly starting off here. And Varian, at the time of recording, he's 4 winners from his last 9 runners on the all-weather. So they're obviously well forward and running well. So perhaps Royal Champion will represent better value than the short price favourite.
All right, well, let's move on to the Lincoln. I think, Ed, you've got an interesting point on this one. 22 horses running in the race. It's quite a big field. But there is at the top of the market an interesting one for Godolphin.
Yeah, modern news to Charlie Appleby, a horse with plenty of potential. I think Charlie Appleby's got a record to saying, you know, he hopes he's a genuine group horse in the handicap, if you like. Steps up to the mile, which on what evidence we've seen from him so far looks as though it will really suit. Of course, did really well at the back end of last year, including when winning at Doncaster as well. So he's got form at the track. He'll have form. The drying ground will be no problem. And he's got a young Harry Davis claiming £7 on, who's the champion pony rider. I mean, I saw him riding a winner at Cheltenham at the back end of last year. I think it was in the November meeting. So, yeah, a jockey, I think he's only 17. He's had a long association with Andrew Balding. But, you know, from what I gather, he's very highly regarded, and no surprise at all. See some big stables putting him up. And, I mean, what an endorsement to that young lad's confidence to get Charlie Appleby putting you on the joint favourite in the Lincoln at Doncaster. So, yeah, definitely jockey to keep your eyes on it. No doubt he'll be nervous now, really on the kind of big time, if you like. But, yeah, from what I gather, he's very accomplished in the saddle. And, yeah, modern news, the Charlie Appleby team, definitely one to keep an eye on.
And Stephen, for you, how about any interest in the Lincoln at this stage, or are you just going to keep an eye on that favourite?
Yeah, a good race to watch. I think it's 5-1 the field. There's been money for the front 3, and they're all quite short. In fact, I think it's 9-2 each of 3 at the moment. The one that has been the right money for is Salem of Simon and Ed Crisford, who is probably going to be at a fitness advantage, perhaps over some of these. He won a couple of modest races on the all-weather in November, and they've preserved his handicap mark since. I think they think that 97 is on the lenient side, and some decent ground now. Switching to the turf will suit him ideally. The fact he's attracted money, I think Simon and Chris have got a really good strike rate with their horses, particularly when there's money for them. So I'll be keeping a close eye on him. I think he's around 5 or 6 to 1. He's shortened up in the last week, but tiny stakes, Joe. It's not a race to be getting too heavily involved with.
Yeah, definitely one for the notebook as we move into the flat season later on. Well, Ed, I want to go over to you now and looking at Sunday's card at Ascot. We've kind of touched on already the highlight for you, but can you take us through the rest of it and see what really does stand out from a punting point of view?
Yeah, just to whiz through it, really. Where are we going? Yeah, in the opener at the 1 o'clock, I actually quite like Captain Morgs for Nicky Henderson. You'll remember he won here back at the back end of last, was in November it was. He won it at the track. Must have good ground. Still, I think it's got potential to be better than his current handicap mark, but the weather, crucially, is going to come right for him. Yeah, he couldn't get into the Cheltenham Festival for any race. He wasn't rated high enough, so he's interested in the 1 o'clock. Moving on to the 2:10. Novices handicap chase. Now, similar kind of theme to a lot of these horses in this race is Time White for Paul Nicholls, who's a horse who was declared a non-runner on the morning of the Grand Annual. Obviously, the ground had got the pot, so they pulled him out. He's an absolute glider. He wants a sound surface. He'll jump in, he'll travel. He probably doesn't always find as much as you think at the end of a race, but it's often compounded when he meets soft ground and an undulated track. So I actually think a real blessing in disguise missing that. He could easily line up in the 2:10, the novice handicap chase there, where he ought to have a cracking chance if he does so. Then there's the 2:45. I touched upon it earlier on the show. It's the juvenile handicap hurdle, which has a lot of the horses who didn't make the cut for the Boodles, those rated in the early 120s, if you like, including Dr. TJ Eckelberg for Ollie Murphy arriving on a hat-trick. Paul Nicholls has Irish Hill in here. A lot was thought of. He's disappointed a little bit. The one I thought was really interesting, though, was for Ian Williams, Saint Requie. Was last seen in the Grade 1 finale at Chepstow, bottomless ground, tailed off. If you go back to his form on a really sound surface, go back to Cheltenham's November meeting, it's only beaten 2.5 lengths by Night Salute. Well, Night Salute's rated 140 and has obviously won a Grade 2 since. Saint Requie gets near 120. So on that line of form through Night Salute, he does look very well treated. And as I said, he bombed out on bad ground last time out. I wouldn't be shocked if he took a step forward here. You got the handicap chase at 320. Some old favourites in there, like Riders on the Storm, McCall's Form, Daddy Kerwin, Champagne Court. And then the 355, one for all the veterans, for the die-hard jumps fans. We've got ASO, who's placed in the Ryanair. Chase could line up. Elegant Escape, of course, tipped up really here in the Kim Muir. Previous Welsh national winners entered. And there'll be no more popular winner than Regal Encore, of course. A horse, 14 years young, absolutely loves the place, comes alive whenever he gets to Ascot. Quarter distance form, dropping off his CV. He's had so much of it. So, it's a really fun day's card. There'll be some interesting punting opportunities. The ground should be good. But obviously, at the time of recording, we don't know the final fields.
Lovely stuff, Ed. And of course, we will get to your tips of the week later on in the show. But Vincent, you've been sat there nice and patiently waiting for the Irish section. So now we're going to start off with the Irish Lincoln. Now, Ado McGuinness has got quite a strong field of runners going into this one. And you like the one of them in particular.
Yeah, it's an interesting race for lots of reasons. Obviously, it's a major handicap sponsored by Paddy Power, 100,000 in prize money, which is similar to, or the same amount as the UK one is in pounds. Ado McGuinness runs 7 here, which is very interesting. He himself is over in Dubai for racing this weekend, but his team at home, they 2 winners on Wednesday evening in Dundalk, and they'll fancy their chances here. The interesting thing for me is the top weight in it, a horse called Current Option, is the current favourite with Paddy Power anti-post on the race. They made him an 8-1 chance. I'd be against him in a big way. He's run 9 times in his career over a mile or a mile 1, and he's been beaten every time. He's really only a 6 and 7 furlong horse. I would imagine that he's possibly in here to keep the weights down for some of the others, so I can't see why he's favoured personally. The one I like in it is the 2020 winner of the race called Bowerman, which is also one of Ado McGuinness's. This horse races off a pound. There's only a pound in the difference from when it won the race 2 years ago, and it's actually less than 2 years ago because of COVID. The race was run in June that time, and it absolutely hosed up that day. Up to the time of recording here, we had jockeys for 6 of Ado McGuinness's. No jockey for this. I'd be hoping the likes of Ronan Whelan. I don't know whether he's riding for them over in Dubai and maybe come back for it. Not quite sure if that's a possibility. Actually, that's not a possibility because the race would probably be on the same day, won't it? But the bottom line for me is that Bowerman has a big chance each way. Let's see who rides it, and we'll get a steer there. It's 14-1 at the minute. I think it's definitely worth a bet, presuming all things go equal. The ground will be coming in his favour as well, because we're talking about the ground was yielding to soft during the week. It's now yielding to soft in places. We're got 20-degree sunshine here, the same as in the UK. So I'd imagine that we're going to be in a similar situation. Goodish ground for the Curragh come Saturday.
Anyway, we're going to move on now to our tips of the weekend. I know some of the guys have actually spoken about theirs, but let's go into it more in depth and see how our guys are doing in terms of their profit here on Jump to It. All right, so Stephen, I'll start with you, and you're looking at Kelso for a couple of your tips. You are the only tips to hear is in 3 figures of profit in terms of their units. So yeah, take us away with the tips for this weekend.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the jumps for the next few weeks. I think probably after Aintree we'll change over to the flat personally. I'm going up to Kelso, a couple of races. They're both televised, so people will be able to watch them at home. The 135 at Kelso. I'm keen here on Diamond Slate of Lucinda Russell. Now, this one has run almost exclusively at Musselburgh. Has got a good record, but I think he's a galloping type, and Kelso and going left-handed I think will suit him. He wants decent ground. He doesn't do anything in a hurry, but he's running really well. He's inching up the handicap, improving run-to-run like all of Lucinda Russell's have been over the last few months. I think he's a sporting sort of nap on a competitive day of action. And the other one I liked was in the 3:15 at Kelso, a mare of Tim Easterby's called Betty Ballou. She's quite a free-going sort. She's taken a while to get the hang of hurdling. but she won at Catterick last time out, the 5th time of asking over Timber. She's back into handicaps from a fair mark, and I think she's the sort of mare that'll do better with a stronger pace, should help her settle, get into a rhythm, and hopefully she can come through on the long Kelso running.
Lovely stuff. Well, best of luck to you, Stephen. And Ed, over to you with a couple of tips from Ascot.
Yeah, go for Ascot. Bearing in mind, looking at the weather, the ground's going to dry up. I think it's officially good to softer place now. There's a chance I probably might need to water just to maintain. So that's going to suit a few horses in here, specifically Captain Morgs for Nicky Henderson, a horse who, when it was unseasonably dry in November, won really nicely here in a competitive race. And he is 2 from 2 at Ascot anyway. Loves this venue, but crucially wants some nice ground. Got absolutely bogged down in the mud at the King George meeting at Kempton over the Christmas period. Was backed into 3-1 favourite that day, but went out like a light. Back on a sound surface, I think he's better than a mark of 131. So I like him in the 1 o'clock. And then where are we? It's the 2:10. Paul Nicholls elects to run Time White here rather than go to Aintree, or even could do both. But Time White was a non-runner before the Grand Annual because the ground got too deep. He's also with a touch of class. He's run well in the likes of Betfair Hurdles and things before. And again, ground just crucial to his chances. I think he won at Doncaster in spite of soft ground rather than because of soft ground last time out. When he won at Chepstow a few starts ago on genuine good ground, he absolutely just pinged off that surface. So I like to think there's more to come from him off 142. And he'd be my other bet there. And with ground, as I said, looking to ride on the quick side.
Fantastic. Nice one, Ed. Well, again, best of luck to you as well. Now, Vincent, we're going to go to your couple of tips for the weekend if you're still with us.
This one runs in the Curragh on Saturday, the 4-16 race, which is the Lincoln. It's this horse, Bowerman. I think it's well worth a bet each way. Won the race less than 2 years ago off a £1 higher mark. Likes good ground, so the quicker the ground gets, the better there. And then the other one is in the listed bumper on Sunday, which is the 5:10 in Limerick. I fancy this I Care Jobrel of Tom Cooper's. He keeps saying that this is a very special horse, and it certainly looked at the first day when it won 8.5 lengths in Naas. Presuming Willie Mullins won't run all 3 of his, he'll presumably pick one. So it'll only have the one to beat, one of Willie Mullins's, and it's well worth a bet.
Fantastic. Well, we've got that bet now. We've got your tip. We heard it fine. So thank you, Vincent, for that. And thank you to Ed Quigley as well and Stephen Harris once again. That wraps it up for this edition of Jump to It. Of course, if you do follow our experts and bet, please do gamble responsibly. We'll be back again very soon here on irishracing.com.